And I will just take a minute. I have many more sort of detailed recommendations about solutions that I won't get into, but one thing that we're doing as we go around the state right now is we know there are a lot of communities coming out of the killing of George Floyd and a real awakening that has followed that, particularly white communities that are interested in taking action on these issues. And so what we've done, and we welcome more thoughts on this because we're just starting this effort, is really trying to create a spectrum of activities that can happen in predominantly white towns to start doing something on this. And they go from sort of lightweight, easy things like just doing self-education and reading, and we've included some great books here. And then we've also got some of our own resources that are available on our website. But then educating your community, and you guys are already here. You're doing this piece. And there can be a speaker series that even goes beyond this that could think about, what is happening, what are the responses in Darien to affordable housing, what are the things people are worried about? Could we actually bring in some experts to allay some of those fears, talk them through, see if there are people in the community who can be moved on some of this? And I've listed some of the typical myths around affordable housing that we hear so often. And then another, if you want to move up a level, you can really start thinking about assessing what's going on in your own town, like using that opportunity mapping, looking at your own zoning, and then thinking about, there's something called a plan of conservation and development that's supposed to guide what the town is doing, both in terms of conserving the environment, but also developing the town in terms of housing and commercial development. Think about how your town police department is interacting with people of color, either living in town or traveling through town. And there's a good report that the Racial Profiling Prohibition Project has put out that can help do that. And then assess what's going on with town services and clubs and teams and swimming pools, or town lakes, beaches open to everybody. Those are some really good steps to take. And I know some of them can be controversial, but these are hard issues, and sometimes some brave action is required. And then there's all kinds of other things that are even sort of, where the rubber really hits the road, and that talks about getting, assessing how people are feeling, but also really advocating for changes to local zoning. We have this idea, this effort called fair share zoning. We've analyzed for every state, every town in the state, if they really were to take on the appropriate share of the deep need for affordable housing in their region, what would that number actually be? And can you start planning for it? So I'd be happy to talk about that more. Think about identifying land in town that could be donated or used for affordable housing. We have a project that works on that. Think about recruiting families who have vouchers. Think about pursuing this as an election issue in town. And then we have a whole agenda for changes that can happen at the state level. We also have a coalition. Our next meeting is next Tuesday, on the 25th, and happy to share information about that. We also have a really cool event coming up next week that we're doing in partner with the Hartford Area Association of Realtors, that is bringing in some national experts talking about how realtors could play a role in promoting integration. So I have lots of other slides I could talk about, but my thought was to stop there and just take questions if people have them.
Great, Erin, thank you so much. So the way we do this is, if you have a question for Erin, please unmute yourself and feel free to ask questions. I cannot see everybody, so we're rather informal. I see people raising hands. So I think Martha Olson has her hand up. And then Chris, did you have your hand up? No? Okay, so Martha, we'll start with you.
Sure, I just wanted to, get your perspective on the most effective ways to kind of take that sort of laundry list that you just went through to action, because I think at least my time in the town, which, I moved here in 1990, so it's been a lot of time, and it every time the issue comes up, at least as I recall, there the obstacles sort of come up, you know. Um, so so with all of those roadblocks, um, it's kind of easy to kind of drag out nothing changing. Um, and there's something like what 167 zoning communities in Connecticut. So, it can't be necessarily more statewide level. So is the best way through town government? Is it through grassroots pressure? Is it through what?
I really think it takes an approach that brings in all kinds of angles. I think you could advocate for changes on the state level that could then change what's going on in town. So that's one piece of this. But I think these kinds of conversations are a really important place to start, and continuing to have them with your neighbors and spreading the word. In Glastonbury, for example, we've got a number of churches who are working on this issue. We've got a couple of local town groups who are active, and they're trying to become active in the affordable housing plan that each town now has to do. So they're trying to design that and direct that so it really supports more affordable housing in their town and then becomes actionable. We're also together, we've identified a piece of property, and we're trying to find developers who are going to work with us to develop it. And then they're also thinking about actually analyzing their own zoning ordinance and advocating for changes at the town level. And the plan of conservation development is also a place for that as well. But I think this kind of local action that I could see this group, and maybe this group has already done, is a great place for that. I think it really can happen with an organized group of citizens who care about the town.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Great, thank you. Anybody else have a question? Chris.
Hi, I've got like a two-part question. One is, have you been in touch at all with Senator Anwar and his proposal that I'm pretty sure didn't end up going to a vote in the special session? And the second question is, I guess, so I've done a little bit of research about the zoning ordinance rules in Darien, and I'm pretty sure what I know about it is that we founded our zoning department in 1925, the same year that we had a town resident in charge of the Ku Klux Klan of the state of Connecticut. Our zoning regulations are, I think, on the order of like 300 pages. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the PDF document that I downloaded said that. And a quick, our zoning had the word character in it 56 times, and it had the words equity, race, ethnicity, discrimination in there 0 times. How would you go? Do you think it's worth going to planning and zoning meetings right off the bat and shaking the book and saying, hey, these are things that I don't think are acceptable? And do you think that's a way to start making change? Or do you think that you need to lay groundwork to do that?
I mean, I always think laying groundwork is a good idea. I think analyzing your ordinance exactly the way you've done and going deeper into it is great. And I'd be happy to talk separately about things that you might want to look at in the zoning ordinance. I think that, the sort of 2 avenues that we have been starting to use here. One is this notion of fair share, and that's another, session we could do. We could talk about what the fair share is for the town and how we got there, and try to make that a center piece for advocacy, both around the plan of conservation of development, the zoning ordinance, maybe a rewrite, and this affordable housing plan. But also think about actually working to get something built. And you can sort of decide on a strategy based on what is going to possibly work in the town as the best vehicle, but something that will create an opportunity to have the conversation. And that's when I have found people become the most engaged, is when there's something real. So getting together and actually trying to get some housing built is, I think, one of the best strategies. And one thing you can also do when you do that, which lots of people don't know about this, there's a state law that basically says if you own land in a town and you're trying to get something built and change the zoning, you can ask for that change to the zoning be not just for the piece of land that you're trying to do something on, but for all kinds of places in the town. You can ask for what's called a text change to the town. So one thing that's going on around the country right now is this idea of missing middle housing and allowing duplexes, triplexes, quadruplexes in areas where normal, single family homes are built. Just say they're allowed everywhere. And that's a change to the zoning that would be meaningful to families without a whole lot of money, and could be something that is done as a town-wide effort, and is happening. The whole state of Oregon is doing that. The city of Minneapolis, I think Massachusetts is considering something like this now. So it really is a trend around the country, and it would be pretty cool to be the town in Connecticut that sort of got ahead of that trend.
Great. Anyone else? Oh, Chris? Well, anyone else first? Abby, did you have your hand up? Abby, not? No? Okay. Sorry about that.
Not yet, but thank you.
Just the first
Okay.
question.
I know Mickey Porta has a question in the chat box. I'll read that. Chris, go ahead. I think you probably have a follow-up.
Oh, no, I asked two questions, and the first one was kind of unrelated. But so if someone wants to go first, but I was asking about.
Yeah, Senator Anwar's bill. Yeah, so I can put it in the chat, and Senator Anwar is fantastic. He's such a great housing supporter and advocate, and it was really fantastic that he was willing to undertake the effort to look at this bill. There are tons of good parts about it. There's pieces that are updating what Connecticut's doing on sewers. There's a lot of this missing middle, sort of aspects of it that encourage missing middle. But unfortunately, what happened with that bill, which happens so often in the legislative process, is there were pieces of it that we had, one piece that we had a concern about going into the legislative drafting, and then another piece that ended up being a problem coming out of legislative drafting. So right now in the statute that they were amending, 8-2, our Zoning Enabling Act, every town actually has an obligation to allow multifamily housing. And that could be multifamily housing that's 3 units. It could be multifamily housing that's 50 units. There's not a limit on it. What came out of legislative drafting was that the towns only had to do something, had to allow, and then there was even another limit on this that I'll get to, that sort of what's called gentle density. So not anything big, but 2, 3, 4 unit buildings. And we will never get to meet the need for affordable housing in this state if that's all we do. It just won't happen. So that's one concern. And then the other concern was at the front end going in, there was a limit. There's sort of the only obligation towns would have is to allow that missing middle housing in only 10% of the land area of the town. And also that is also insufficient. And then there was some priority for around village centers and within a half mile, I think, of transit, which could be captured in the 10%. So it's just not sufficient to actually, if you understand what the need is, it's not sufficient to meet the need that we have in the state, and it actually put us backwards rather than forward. So it was really good that the ideas were out there, and I'm sure this will come up again in the special session or in the real session. And I was in conversations with people who are working on it today, and I'm sure it's going to be much more robust in its new iteration.